Almost 5 years to the day from when I was originally due here, cancelled so many times by COVID, a final approach into Haneda in Tokyo unveils Mount Fuji as I venture further east than I've ever done before. Kyoto, located in the Kansai region, was the historical capital of Japan for nearly 1100 years. Chosen as the seat of the imperial court by Emperor Kanmu in 794, it was the centre of the political world of Japan through multiple eras, even when the emperor themselves played a backseat role for feudal shogun rulers who oversaw their own parts of the country. With the end of the shogun period and the re-establishment of the emperor, first of Japan, and then to a wider area of East Asia as the country pursued colonial expansionism, the new emperor relocated the capital to Edo and renamed that city to Tokyo in 1868. No longer the capital, Kyoto became a secondary city in the country, but because of this it was spared the worst of the devastation of World War II, leaving the city with a cultural heritage that dates back centuries, making it still the cultural capital of the country. From countless Shinto shrines and Buddhist temples to imperial palaces and parks, the city still has all the trappings of its role as a capital. There is lots of evidence of human settlement in the area of modern-day Kyoto, dating back to at least the Paleolithic period, though little written evidence exists before the founding of a Shimagamo shrine in the 6th century. A new city, Heian, literally tranquility and peace capital, later renamed to Kyoto, and modelled after the Chinese Tang dynasty capital Chang'an, became the new seat of the Japanese imperial court in 794, beginning the Heian period of Japanese history, representing the last phase of classical Japanese history before the move into a feudal society in the latter part of the 12th century. During the feudal period, the city suffered extensive destruction in the Onin War of 1467 to 1477 and took nearly 100 years to recover. To protect themselves, the houses of nobles were transformed into fortresses with deep trenches dug through the city for defence and also to act as fire breaks. The city was reconstructed through the buildings of new north-south streets that created much of the rectangular blocks that exist in the city to today. Throughout this time, whilst the imperial family were the sovereigns of the nation, the actual power and control rested with the shoguns, the military rulers who presided over the running of the country. The last shogunate was the Tokugawa shogun, which established itself in the up-and-coming city of Edo, 450 kilometres to the northeast, starting the Edo period of history, generally considered to be the start of early modern Japan, lasting until the re-establishment of the emperor as the absolute leader of the country in 1868, at the start of the modern period of Japanese history. Despite the shogun moving to Edo, Kyoto continued to flourish, in part due to the construction of a new castle, Nijo Castle, that was built by the first Tokugawa shogun. In 1601, he ordered all the feudal lords in western Japan to contribute to the construction of Nijo Castle, which was completed 25 years later under the reign of his grandson. The castle was built as the Kyoto residence of the shoguns when they were in town to consult with the imperial court, located just a mile to the north. Making use of a portion of land from the, at the time, partially abandoned Shoseien Garden, its abundant water was used to create the castle's gardens and ponds. Today, the fortifications contain the Ninamaru Palace, the Honamaru Palace, various support buildings and gardens, covering a combined area of 275,000 square metres, of which some 8,000 square metres is occupied by buildings. The castle consists of two concentric rings of fortifications, each made up of a wall and a wide moat. The outer wall has 4 gates, with the Great Eastern Gate being the main access point to the site today. The inner wall has 2 gates, with one in ruins and one intact. The buildings inside the castle are a mix of relocated buildings from other locations and purpose-built constructions. Completing the original castle in 1626, parts of the Fushimi castle, such as the main tower and the Karamon, or main gate, were moved here. Whilst the main tower was destroyed following a lightning strike in 1750, the Karamon still stands to today, though in a different location in Kyoto, with a replica now forming the entranceway into the Ninamaru Palace, or Ninamaru Garden. The palace consists of 6 connected buildings decorated with elaborate wood carvings and vast quantities of gold leaf, intended to impress visitors for power and wealth of the shogun. Each sliding door inside the building is decorated with screen paintings. The building was designed specifically with social control in mind, with your rank in society determining how far into the building you could progress, with low-ranking visitors kept to the outer buildings. The Ninamaru Garden is also the location in 1867 of a declaration by the last shogun, Tokugawa Yoshinobu, that returned the authority for running the country to the imperial court. In the following year, the imperial cabinet was installed in the castle and the palace became imperial property. The structure of the buildings is best seen from the Ninamaru Gardens that sit behind the palace. From here you can make out the different buildings staggered behind each other with the linking passageways joining the various structures together. The gardens themselves were laid out in the early 17th century and are set out around a large pond with 3 islands and carefully placed stones and topiary pine trees. Beyond the walls of the Ninamaru Gardens, you reach the inner ward with a second set of high stone walls and a wide moat separating off the inner heart of the palace complex from the rest of the site. Passing through the still intact gate, you enter into the inner sanctum of the palace. Today, the gardens and buildings are very different to how it would have looked when the castle was first constructed. The original elements from Fushimi Castle were destroyed first in a lightning strike on the keep in 1750, and then just 38 years later the remainder of the inner ward was destroyed by a city-wide fire. The site remained empty for over 100 years. Whilst the lightning strike took out the wooden tower, it didn't have much of an impact on the stone foundations of the keep, and they're still standing to today in the southwestern corner of the inner keep. You can climb up the remains of the keep to take in the views across the Honamaru Garden and Palace, as well as the inner fortifications and wider palace complex. After being left vacant for over 100 years, the inner ward was filled back in by moving one part of the former Kastura Palace from within the Kyoto Imperial Palace complex between 1893 and 1894 to the site. This was part of a systematic clearing of the disused residences and palaces in the Imperial Palace complex following the court's move to Tokyo some 15 years earlier. The palace originally had 55 buildings, but only a small part was relocated here. The Honmaru Palace was the location of the enthronement banquet for Emperor Hirohito in 1928. Behind the palace, you exit the inner ward of the castle through the now lost gate and back across the moat to the outer ward. The Nijo Castle complex remained under the control of the Imperial Court until 1939, when it was donated to the city of Kyoto and opened up to the public the following year. Just over a mile to the northeast of the Nijo Castle is the site of the last Imperial Palace of Kyoto, today in the parklands of the Kyoto Goyen National Garden. The original Imperial Palace of Heian was located just to the west of where Nijo Castle stands today, but was gradually abandoned following the last of several major fires in 1177. Even before the destruction of the Heian Palace, the Emperor's residences had moved into this northern part of the city, usually in the homes of powerful noble families who provided their home to the Emperor to be close to power. In this location, the Imperial Palace has been destroyed and rebuilt 8 times due to fires, 6 of those taking place during the Edo period itself. The final version of the palace was only completed in 1855, attempting to reproduce the original Heian period architecture and style of the original palace. The court would move out just 14 years later when the capital relocated to Tokyo, and by 1877 the preservation of the building was ordered. So this really is a one careful owner, almost never used palace. The palace is still under the control of the Imperial Household Agency, with only the grounds open to the public. You can take a tour of the building, but these need to be booked in advance with the agency. After entering through one of the side gates on the western side of the complex, you initially pass another gate and the carriage entrance before reaching the waiting rooms that dignitaries would first be directed to on their arrival at the palace, before they were ushered into one of 3 different anterooms based on their rank. From the outside of the buildings, you move round to reach the wall of the inner courtyard, its white walls and vermilion painted wood hiding the most important buildings from you. The small Gekamon gate on the western side of the main courtyard allows you a view straight through it to its counterpart, the Nikamon gate, on the eastern side. The Kenrimon gate is the main entrance gate into the palace complex and was used for state ceremonies where the highest ranking foreign dignitaries would enter the complex directly from the grounds and immediately pass through the Jomeon gate opposite into the inner courtyard. Obviously, tourists are not high-ranking foreign dignitaries, so we're shuffled through a side gate to enter the main courtyard and the stunning Shinshinden, the throne hall of the Imperial Palace. Despite the imperial family relocating to Tokyo, the throne hall was still used for the enthronement of Emperors Yoshihito and Hirohito in the early parts of the 20th century. Immediately behind the throne hall is the Seiroden. This was originally a palace where the emperor could conduct their own personal affairs, but was later adapted to be used for meetings as well. The structure was originally built as the emperor's residence at the end of the 8th century and was in use up until the 11th century. It was then dismantled and reassembled in the current location in 1790, though on a smaller scale than originally, but preserving the design of the structure. From the Seiroden, it's a short walk around the corner into the gardens, laid out around a pond, crossed by several bridges. Around the edge of the lake are a number of other official buildings, including several study halls, the most important being the Kogosho, which was the location where the declaration of the restoration of imperial rule took place on the night of December 9th, 1867. Though the current building is a 1958 reconstruction after the original burnt down in 1954. The rest of the route through the Imperial Palace is through the various gardens, including briefly passing by the main Imperial residence that was in use from 1590 until 1869. This is also the largest structure in the palace, with 15 rooms. The Imperial Palace sits the heart of the Kyoto Gion National Garden, but it isn't the only palace in this garden. Sitting just to the southeast of the Imperial Palace is the Kyoto Sento Imperial Palace. This palace was designed for retired emperors, though the last emperor to retire in Kyoto was in 1817. As with so many of the buildings, the originals were destroyed in a fire in 1854, and unlike the main Imperial Palace, they weren't rebuilt. Instead, today, the main attraction is the gardens, which can be visited on an organised tour. Sakura, or cherry blossom season, is a period in Japan when the countless cherry trees across the nation spring into bloom. Given the sheer number of trees planted across the country, it leads to spectacular displays in many of the country's cities, as well as leading to a spike in tourism. The season starts around January in Okinawa, down in the southernmost islands of Japan, before moving up through the country, reaching Kyoto and Tokyo by late March or early April, and then finally arriving in Hokkaido, the northernmost of the main islands, a few weeks later. In 2025, the season had started in Kyoto on the 27th of March and reached its peak around the 5th of April, so by the time I was visiting, it was already on the decline, marked by my first 2 days in the city being the last days for Sakura festival events in Nijo Castle. The event is a sound and light show set up around the grounds of the castle at night that lets you explore the complex with the cherry trees illuminated to show off their blossoms. The displays are accompanied by projected illuminations and animations on the various buildings of the castle complex, including the fortification walls and the palace buildings and gatehouse. It's also a great way to explore around the castle grounds in a way that you normally can't, and to see the structures in a totally different way. Located to the west of central Kyoto is the district of Arishiyama. The area is home to Japanese macaque monkeys and the Moon Crossing Bridge, or Togetsuyoko, which has crossed the Kastura River here since at least the 9th century. However, its most famous attraction, and the one that draws thousands of tourists out of the centre of Kyoto to here, is the bamboo forest. This is a natural bamboo forest consisting mostly of moso bamboo set around several paths that wind their way through the dense foliage of trunks and wispy leaves at the top. The the arrow-straight trunk shooting metres up into the sky, topped with foliage that gently moves backwards and forwards in the breeze, has been identified by the Japanese Ministry of the Environment as part of the soundscape of Japan. In total, the bamboo forest occupies an area of 16 square kilometres, though most tourists only see a fraction of this wandering through the carefully laid out paths, all attempting to capture that perfect photo, which, unless you're willing to be here at dawn, is going to include several hundred other tourists. Whilst the almost perfect tunnels of bamboo do make for a spectacular photo, it's an equally awe-inspiring sight to look up towards the canopy as the bamboo bends to meet its counterparts on the opposite side of the path, and those views don't include the vast tourist numbers around you. A lot of the tourists visiting are on a quick stop, a walk up the path, turn round, head back either to the tour coach or back to the JR train into Kyoto, but there's much more to see in the area. Just a short walk from the edge of the bamboo forest and a quick hike up through the town park, you reach a viewpoint that looks down into the Rankyo Gorge of the Kastura River. At this point, the river is relatively fast-flowing, but it is still navigable for small boats heading to the buildings nestled close to the river's edge, and the temple located high above them on the hillside. Technically, the Kastura River doesn't start until you're past the Moon Crossing Bridge, closer to the centre of Arishiyama, when the Hozu River that was running through the gorge and the Oi rivers join, though most maps call the Hozu the Kastura much further back upstream. With any river in a tourist location, there's bound to be a boat tour, and Arishiyama is no different, with a number of options from the sedate to the adrenaline-filled available. Small Yakatabune, or Japanese houseboats, ply their trade along a short section of the river, entering into the bottom end of the gorge, whilst larger boats start much further up the Hozu River and travel through the whitewater rapids between Kamakura and Arishiyama. In both cases, the boats are directed and, when the water flow isn't assisting, powered by punting, though on a significantly less sedate style than a puny Oxbridge punt. I opted to take a ride on a Yakatabune, a 30-minute round trip into the mouth of the gorge and back to town. The Japanese houseboats are just that, a boat with a roof. You take your shoes off as you board and then sit on cushions on the tatami mats in the main part of the boat, whilst your captain slowly punts you upstream, picking their path past the fellow houseboat captains, as well as the slightly less predictable tourists in rowboats and pedalos. Japanese traders, not one to miss an opportunity, even allow you the chance to pick up something to snack on from the kiosk boat that sails up to meet you as you make your way upstream. The most dramatic part of the tour is as the boat enters the start of a gorge and then makes a turn around a large rock in the middle of a river to start heading back downstream again. Sometimes you even get very, very close to the rock. From Arishiyama, it's back into the centre of Kyoto and then outwards towards the southwest suburb of Fushimi to visit perhaps the most photographed part of the city at the Fushimi Inari shrine. The Fushimi Inari Taisha is the head shrine of the Kami Inari, Kami being the deities, divinities, spirits, mythological, spiritual or natural phenomena that are venerated in Shintoism, and Inari being the Kami of foxes, fertility, rice, tea, sake, agriculture and industry, as well as general prosperity and worldly success. It's one of the principal kami of Shintoism, so naturally this is a popular site. But perhaps it's most famous for the Torii gates, or more importantly the number of vermilion or red-orange painted Torii gates that line the path up the Inari mountain, which the temple sits at the base of. A torii is a traditional Japanese gate most commonly found at the entrance to a shrine, where it symbolically marks the transition from the regular world into the sacred. It's also believed that kami travel through the gates. As merchants worship Inari as the patron of business, they're keen to display their intent, and many businesses have donated torii gates to the complex, with the names of the business written on the back of the gates. Given how popular this is, it's unsurprising that the number of gates across the whole of the shrine complex, the top of the mountain and back down, is around 10,000. At the base of the shrine complex, around 1,000 gates have been placed together in serried ranks, creating a tunnel-like effect. This area, the Senbon Torii, or 1,000 Torii Gates, is once again popular with the Instagram crowd, and another place where you need to be up long before dawn if capturing 1,000 Torii Gates without a similar number of tourists in your shot is your aim. The main block of gates take you up to the Okusha, a place of worship where there are Omakura stone and fox prayer pictures. At this point, many tourists take the route back through the adjacent tunnel of Torii Gates and back towards the main shrine, but many continue the walk through the next set of Torii Gates, which take you to a rest area where you can make a decision. Here, most tourists take the quick route back to the main shrine, but from here you can also start the climb up Mount Inari towards the summit and past the 15 or so smaller shrines and temples on the way up. From here on, as you climb, the numbers start to drop off quite dramatically, either from not wanting to do the climb, or from the 2 hours required to complete the full circuit being too much for a lot of people's itineraries. So from here on in, it's much fairer split between tourists and devotees. The first steep climb up a flight of stone steps takes you to the Kumataka shrine located by the Shin-Iki pond. Then it's another climb up through the continuing serried ranks of Torii Gates to the point where there's a last chance to return back to main shrine via a path that runs around the edge of the complex, or you can commit and press on towards the summit. The route back to the main shrine is also the path you take on your way back down as you exit the mountain. Just before the halfway point up the mountain, you reach a small observation platform where you can stop to catch your breath and take in the views over towards the city before you continue the climb. Shortly after here, you reach the crossroads where the path splits into a circular route, allowing you to go either clockwise or anti-clockwise down the path to the summit and then return here. There are also views from here, and this is the point where most tourists stop before returning, as the path up through and down from the summit is under tree cover the whole way, so there's no further views over the city to be had. From here on, it's another 20 minutes or so to the summit, though the rapidly dwindling numbers of other people around, it's also the most tranquil and beautiful part of the route, as you pass through multiple shrine sites dotted along the path, all the while still walking under the thousands of Torii gates. Such as the Ganrikisha shrine with its fox fountain, or the large complex of the Chojasha shrine. But always climbing. And always surrounded by Torii gates, even high up the mountain. And several false summits. Before finally reaching the Kamisha shrine located at the summit of the mountain. Though what comes up must come down, and from here it's another 20 minutes back to the crossroads, and from there 40 more down to the main shrine. From Fushimi, it's back into the centre of Kyoto and over to one of its most famous districts, Gion, famous for being one of the most exclusive and well-known geisha districts in all of Japan. And infamous for being the site of some of the worst over-tourism and poor tourist behaviour on the planet, with plenty of images and videos of packed streets and tourists trying to photograph the geishas against their will. It's gotten so bad that many of the streets are now either off-limits to non-residents or there are significant 10,000 yen fines, about £50, €60 or $70 in May 2025, just for taking photos down certain closed streets. The area originated as an entertainment district around the 15th century around the Yasaka Shrine, built to accommodate the needs of travellers and visitors to the shrine. It eventually evolved to become the exclusive geisha district that it is today, and it's still home to a significant number of geishas. Geishas are female Japanese performing artists and entertainers trained in traditional Japanese performing art styles such as dance, music, and singing. Their distinct appearance is characterised by a long kimono, traditional hairstyles, and almost white oshiori makeup. The district has been declared a National Historical Preservation District, and the city's undertaken a number of restorative projects to enhance the beauty and historical authenticity of the area, including relocating overhead utilities underground so the vistas look close to how it would have done with wooden houses gently rolling down the slopes of hills centuries ago. I'm continuing my exploration of the cultural capital of Japan by heading to some of the largest, goldenest and guardianest temples in the city. My first stop is the Kinkaku-ji, or Temple of the Golden Pavilion, named for, once you see it, pretty obvious reasons. The temple complex, officially called the Rokonkai Temple, is a Rinzai sect temple, the Rinzai sect being one of the 5 schools of Chinese Zen Buddhism, the other being Heian, Soto, Unmon and Hokan. Whilst the temple is officially called Rokonki, it's often referred to as Kinkaku-ji, after the golden pavilion that forms the main tourist draw to the site. The area around the temple was originally built as a villa for a powerful statesman in the 13th century, before passing in 1397 to the shogun and transformed into the Kinkaku-ji complex. When the shogun died, the building was converted into a Zen temple by his son, according to his wishes. The original Golden Pavilion is believed to have been built at the very end of the 14th century, though within 70 years, all of the rest of the buildings of the complex, except for the Golden Pavilion, were destroyed in the Onin War. The complex was rebuilt and survived through the ravages of nearly 600 years, including passing through the Second World War unscathed until the early hours of July 2nd, 1950, when the pavilion was burned down in an arson attack carried out by a novice monk. The current pavilion dates from 1955, when it was rebuilt to the same specification as the original building, though there have been some questions as to whether the original had so much gold leaf on it. During restoration work between 1986 and 1987, the gold leaf was replaced after the original coat on the reconstruction had started to peel off. The replacement gold leaf is half a micrometre thick, about a tenth the thickness of the human hair, but the total amount of gold is still in excess of 20 kilograms across the whole building, worth about £1.5 million in May 2025 prices. The temple is set in a Japanese strolling garden that forms the circular route you take to pass around the temple site, and the pavilion overlooks a mirror pond that's designed to reflect the building. The pond itself contains 10 smaller islands. From the Golden Temple, it's a hop across the city to the Kinkaku-ji, also known as the Higashiyama Jisho-ji. Like the Golden Temple, this is also a Rinzai sect temple, with Kinkaku-ji meaning silver pavilion, though in this case the pavilion isn't laden with silver leaf. In 1473, the then shogun, grandson of a shogun who had created Kinkaku-ji, handed over the role to his son and went into retirement. 9 years later, he began construction of the Higashiyama villa at the foot of Mount Tsukimi. The site had been a temple previously, but was burnt down in the Onin War, making the space available for him to build a mountain villa. The former shogun died in January 1490, and just a month later the villa was, again, converted into a Zen temple to commemorate him. The gardens of the temple were designed at the same time as it was constructed and feature wooded grounds covered with a variety of mosses. Though the main feature on the flatter ground at the foot of the mountain are the dry sand gardens, including a conical sculpture said to represent Mount Fuji. The temple has fallen victim to countless fires and earthquakes over the centuries, with almost all the buildings having been replaced multiple times, the only exception being the Silver Pavilion and one other building that have both survived intact. The compact gardens, while smaller than those at some other temples, are still a pleasure to explore, irrespective of weather, managing to get both a rainstorm and sunny skies in the 10 minutes I wandered around them. From the upper level of the gardens, you can look down across the whole of the complex and take in the different buildings, as well as the Silver Pavilion sitting by itself to one side. The final walk back down from the gardens to the exit takes you right past the Silver Pavilion for a final look at the building. It's just a 250-metre walk downhill from the temple complex to the start of the Philosophers Path, a 2-kilometre walk that runs alongside a small canal. Despite it being the end of sakura, or cherry blossom season, the cherry trees that line both banks of the canal were still heavy with blossom, though every breeze through the trees created a snowfall of petals that were falling in the water of the canal to be carried off towards the city centre. The path links from close to the Silver Pavilion to the neighbourhood of Zenrinji, home to the next temple on my list to visit, so it also makes for a convenient and pleasant route to get between the two, especially as by now the sun was out and the rain had cleared away. The path got its name due to Nishiyama Kitaro, 1870 to 1945, one of Japan's most famous philosophers who was said to practice meditation while walking this route on his daily commute to Kyoto University. The canal the path runs alongside is part of the Lake Biwa Canal, which connects through tunnels from Lake Biwa, around 9 kilometres to the east, which was built between 1868 and 1912 to enhance transportation in the region and provide additional water to Kyoto. From the southern end of the Philosopher's Path is a very short walk round the corner to the Eikando Temple. The Eikando Zenrinji, to give it its full name, is the head temple for the Saizan branch of Japan's Jodo-shu Buddhist sect. The temple is significantly older than the previous temples I'd visited, with its founding dating to 853. The origins of the temple date back to when Sozo Shinso, a disciple of Kukai, built a temple hoping to establish a training centre for the Shingon sect in the then capital. Shinso purchased the mountain villa of the late poet and writer Fujiwara no Saeku and turned this into a temple. At the time, it was forbidden to build private temples without permission, so 10 years later, in 863, Emperor Siwa granted the temple an imperial license as a fixed-rate temple, a temple with a fixed amount of money, and the name Zenrinji, making it officially recognised as a temple. True to its founding, the temple started as a training centre for the Shingon sect, but by the end of the 11th century it was transformed into a Nembutsu temple. Nembutsu is the Buddhist practice in which you visualise the image and merits of the Buddha and call out his name. The temple was heavily damaged by fires during the Onin War, but immediately after the end of the war the emperor ordered it to be rebuilt and work began on its restoration. In 1876, the temple became the eastern head temple of a Jodo sect, Shizen-ha. However, less than 50 years later, the sect split into three due to differences in beliefs, with one of those three becoming the Jodo sect, Shizen Zenrinji, with the temple becoming the head temple for this branch of the sect. There are two different parts of the temple complex that you can explore. Firstly, the main complex itself, where, after leaving your shoes at the entrance, you can wander around large parts of the almost completely wooden structure, including being invited to enter some of the temple rooms or to observe ceremonies in progress from the walkways outside. The internal walkways continue up through the complex to the base of the hill that the temple's pagoda sits upon, and from here you can look across the whole temple site. Shoes back on, you can wander around the grounds of the temple, including climbing all the way to the base of the Tahoto Pagoda, from where there are views out west across the centre of the city to the mountains on the opposite side. You can also wander around the gardens, particularly around the Hojo Pond, where you can take in the colours of the Japanese maple trees. As well as get views back up the hill to the Tahoto Pagoda. Back across town to an area absolutely packed with different temples, so many in fact that you can end up visiting one you weren't even expecting, as was the case with my visit to the Koshoji Temple, as I'd been aiming for the neighbouring and larger Nishi Hongan-ji Temple. The Koshoji Temple shares the moat with its neighbour. In fact, the two temples are related and are both Jodo Shinzu sect temples, albeit slightly different versions, one being Shinju Koshowa and one being Shinju Hongan-ji. The temple was originally built as a sub-temple of its neighbour, but with a split in the sect, it eventually became the head temple for this branch of the sect. As with so many other buildings in Kyoto, the original structures have been destroyed by fire on multiple occasions, so the current double hall structures only date from around 1912, with further damage being done to the Goei-do, or Founders Hall, in the effects of the earthquake centred in Osaka in 2018. Repair works were only completed in 2022. The temple follows a structure that I was about to become very familiar with, of an Amida-do linked via a corridor bridge to a Goei-do. The complex entrance is through an elaborate gatehouse. The neighbouring Nishi Hongan-ji has a very similar structure, but it appeared on a slightly bigger scale, if only from the size for grounds, if not for buildings. The temple was originally founded in 1272 elsewhere in the city and only settled in its current location in 1591, though many of the buildings have been rebuilt in the subsequent years, with Amida Hall being rebuilt in 1760 and the Goei-do in 1636. A few blocks to the east of the Nishi Hongan-ji, and constructed just 11 years after, albeit subsequently rebuilt multiple times following various fires, is the Higashi Hongan-ji, the head temple of the Otani faction of Jodo-Shin Buddhism. The complex occupies multiple city blocks, and its location, just a short distance from Kyoto Station, makes it one of the most popular for temples in the city to visit. It's also home, with its Goei-do, to the largest wooden building in the city. Entrance into the complex is through the imposing 28-metre high Maido Gate, rebuilt in 1911 and counted as one of the 3 great gates of Kyoto. This leads you into the central courtyard, and immediate in front of you is the Goei-do, or Founder's Hall. The Goei-do Hall is 76 metres wide, 58 metres deep and 38 metres high. Construction of the hall began in 1880 and was completed in 1895. The hall is divided into an inner sanctuary, outer sanctuary and worship seats. Out on the corridor of the Goei-do, you can get a good view across the whole of the site, including the neighbouring Amida Hall, as well as the Shoro Bell Tower rebuilt in 1894, Amida-do Gate rebuilt in 1911, and the main Maido Gate. The Amida-do has a similar layout to the Goei-do, with an inner sanctuary, which at the time of visiting had shutters up as the sanctuary was being prepared for a service later in the day, the outer sanctuary and the worship area. At 52 metres by 47 metres by 29 metres, it's quite a bit smaller than the Goei-do and was constructed at the same time. Unlike many of the other temples, the gardens of the Higashi Hongan-ji are not located in the main temple site, instead being situated a couple of blocks further east in the Shoseien Garden. The gardens were built in the middle of the 17th century on land donated by the then shogun. The gardens are roughly 200 by 200 metres square, covering the equivalent of around 6 blocks. The gardens were designed as a retreat for the high priest of the Higashi Hongan-ji temple and as a location for him to receive foreign guests. Around the edge of the garden are a number of tea houses and other structures, but the main feature is the central pond, the Ingetsu-ji, which visitors follow a circular path around, taking in the changing vistas as you cross bridges and follow the narrow paths through plants and monuments. The final temple of my visit is perhaps one of the newest in the city, the Haian Jingu shrine. The shrine was created in 1895 to commemorate the 1100th anniversary of the relocation of the capital of Japan to Kyoto in 794, and from the south the approach is made with the impressive Torii, or Great Torii, which at 24 metres high and 18 metres wide was only added in 1928 as the project to build a large enough Torii gate worthy of the Heian shrine out of stone or wood was considered too difficult when the shrine first opened. By 1928 the gate could finally be confidently built out of steel reinforced concrete. The shrine's main building is a partial replica of the original Imperial palace for the Heian period, albeit on a smaller scale. Sadly, at the time of visiting, the main shrine building was undergoing renovations, so was covered in scaffolding and sheeting, slightly reducing the overall impressiveness of the site. Wrapped around the shrine itself are the gardens, which are an impressive set of strolling gardens set around multiple ponds. Perhaps the most important part of the gardens, given the time I was visiting, are its weeping cherry trees, which generally blossom a few days later than the other cherry trees in the city, so at the time of visiting they were at peak blossom. The garden is made up of 4 areas: the South Shrine Gardens, which is the area where you first enter into the grounds and has the largest number of weeping cherry trees. The West Shrine Garden includes the Byakko Pond, which is surrounded by over 200 varieties of irises, as well as topiary pine trees. The Nakajin Garden houses the Soroyo Pond on the western side, over which Japanese maple trees add a blast of colour. And on the eastern side of the pond you can cross it on the stones of the Gaeru Bridge. But the most picturesque part of the gardens are the East Shrine Garden, set around the Saiho Pond and featuring the Shobukan, a guest house, and the Taihaikan covered bridge, both relocated from the Kyoto Imperial Palace. With some of the best views of the garden to be had from the centre of the covered bridge. The shift of power from Kyoto to Tokyo was gradual, as over 300 years, then Edo, grew from a fishing village to the capital of Japan. To get a better understanding of a city that covers nearly 3,000 square kilometres with a population of 14 million people, both around double that of London, which when you expand out the metropolis adds another 10,000 square kilometres and takes the population up to a staggering 41 million people, I've headed to the highest man-made point in the country, the Tokyo Skytree. At 634 metres, when it completed construction in 2011, it was, and in 2025 still is, the tallest tower in the world and the 3rd tallest building on the planet. So from the viewing platform at 350 metres, you can get some pretty good views across the city, both during the day and at night. The site of modern-day Tokyo has been inhabited since ancient times, though with sea levels causing Tokyo Bay to rise by over a metre since the Holocene glacial retreat, it's difficult to say how much settlement there may have been in the Paleolithic era, as much may well be underwater in Tokyo Bay. In 534, a large-scale conflict was recorded in the area, and just over 100 years later, the Senso-Ji was founded in 645. Then known as Edo, the city was first fortified in the late 12th century, and Nijo Castle was built in 1457 to defend the city. In 1603, the Tokugawa shogunate, who were already based in the city, took over the running of the country, though the capital remained in Kyoto, but this marked the start of the Edo period of Japanese history. During the Edo period, the city experienced a prolonged period of peace and seclusion, known as the Pax Tokugawa, during which the lack of any devastation by conflict being wrought on the city allowed Edo to devote most of its resources to expanding and repairing after constant fires, earthquakes, and other natural disasters that routinely hit the city. Around 1721, the city's population passed the 1 million mark, becoming one of the first cities to reach the milestone, and over the decades that followed, it continued to grow. The peace couldn't last, and for once it wasn't the British coming to cause problems, it was the Americans. American Commodore Matthew C. Perry arrived in 1853 and forced the opening of the ports to force trade on the country. The resulting inflation from the demand for foreign goods led to social unrest and eventually rebellions. At the same time, supporters of the emperor saw this as an opportunity to consolidate power, and eventually it led to the overthrow of the last shogun in 1867. In May 1868, Nijo Castle was handed over to the emperor's supporting forces, and shortly afterwards the entire city came under the control of a new government. Swiftly after this, the emperor took back control of the country from the shogun system, and in 1869 symbolically moved the capital from Kyoto to Edo, renaming the city Tokyo in the process. In reality, it was more a confirmation of the situation that had lasted for nearly 300 years, of Edo being the political capital of the country. At 11:58 on the morning of Saturday the 1st of September 1923, the Great Kanto earthquake, centred on Oshima Island just 100 kilometres from Tokyo Bay, and estimated to be somewhere between 7.9 and 8.2 on the moment magnitude scale, struck. The immediate effects of collapsing buildings, combined with the ensuing firestorms that raged through the city, killed more than 100,000 people and pretty much destroyed Tokyo, with little left standing. The crisis that followed on the heels of the earthquake helped to shift the mindset of the population of Japan and created a culture of militarism that would ultimately lead the country into the wars that culminated in the country's destruction again in 1945 at the end of World War II. Following the war, Tokyo became the base from which Allied occupational forces administered Japan for 6 years. It was only after this period that the Japanese economy significantly started to develop again, with heavy industry output finally surpassing pre-war levels. But what followed were 2 decades of some of the fastest growth and development of the country, as Japan became the technological and business powerhouse that by the start of the 1972 oil crisis made it the world's second largest economy, a position it held until it was overtaken by China in 2010. Today, Tokyo is one of the world's capitals, a city held by many in awe for its technological and business prowess, and an almost futuristic look and feel that many Western cities would love to replicate. But it's not all flashy modern towers. In the shadow of the Skytree, on the opposite banks of the Sumida River, sits the Senso-Ji, that Buddhist temple first recorded in 645. The Senso-Ji is the oldest established temple in the city, but the current complex dates from rebuilding works in the 1950s, as the entire structure was destroyed on the 10th of May 1945 after a firebombing air raid on Tokyo during World War II. The first part of the complex is the Kaminari Mon, or Thunder Gate, located some 400 metres south of the main temple building. It's particularly well known for the large lantern that hangs in the main archway of the gate, a popular Instagram spot. This gate was only added to the complex in 941, nearly 300 years after the founding of the temple, and was originally placed further away from the temple than its current location. The gate was reconstructed in its current site in 1635, when it's believed the gods of wind and thunder were first placed on the outside of the gate. The current gate is, though, a reconstruction from 1960, with the gate having burnt down in 1649 and 1757 and 1865. In fact, the gate wasn't rebuilt after the 1865 fire, so in this case it wasn't a case of post-war rebuilding, more just completing the complex. The Nakami's-dori is a 250-metre long street that runs in a straight line from the Kaminari-mon to the Hozomon, the inner gate of the complex. Since the temple became independent of any sect after World War II, the street today is home to shops selling traditional goods. The Hozomon, or Treasure House Gate, is the inner of the 2 entrance gates of the Senso-Ji. It's a 2-storey gate with a second storey housing many of the treasures of the temple. The Hozomon was first built in 942, the year after the Kaminari-mon, and was destroyed by fire in 1631. Rebuilt in 1636, it stood for over 300 years until the 10th of May 1945 when it was destroyed in the firebombing raids. In 1964, the current steel-reinforced concrete structure was built. It's only because the building is made from flame-resistant materials that the upper story houses the treasures of the temple. The Hozomon houses 2 guardian statues and 3 large lanterns. The largest and most prominent of these is a red chochin that hangs under the centre of the gate's opening. The lantern is 3.75 metres high, with a diameter of 2.7 metres, and weighs around 400 kilograms. Once through the gate, you're into the inner complex of the temple, with the main hall, and off to one side, the 5-storey pagoda. Beyond the incense burner, you reach the main hall of the temple, or the Canon Hall, so called because it houses a principal image of the temple, the statue of a Bodhisattva Canon. Just above the steps leading up into the hall is the largest of the lanterns at the site, at 4.5 metres tall, 3.5 metres wide, and weighing around 600 kilograms. The hall was rebuilt in 1649 and was designated a national treasure as a masterpiece of large-scale temple halls in the early modern period. As of the rest of the city, the hall burnt down on the 10th of May 1945 and was the first part of the complex to be rebuilt, opening again in 1958, this time made out of reinforced concrete rather than wood. The temple is divided into an inner and outer sanctuary, with the roof of the outer sanctuary featuring ceiling paintings called Dragon and tenin scattering flowers. Beyond the main hall is the temple pagoda, a 5-storey structure that was built around the same time as the Hozomon in 942, originally as a 3-storey structure. As with so many other parts of the complex, it burnt down several times and was rebuilt as 5 storeys in 1648. Following World War II, its reconstruction was completed in 1973. The Sumida River is a major 23.5-kilometre river that flows through the heart of Tokyo and out into Tokyo Bay. The Japanese have, over the centuries, engineered and diverted the waterways in and around Tokyo to prevent flooding and manage water resources, so technically the river is what used to be the main channel of the Arakawa River, with the latter being diverted to the east of the city centre to prevent flooding, particularly around the Imperial Palace, which sits close to the course of what is today the Sumida. Following extensive works to expand the Arakawa floodway all the way down to the mouth of the river in 1965, the names of the rivers were changed, with the floodway becoming the Arakawa and the former route becoming the Sumida. Due to the shape and flow of the river, it's possible for the Sumida River to flow backwards due to the effects of earthquakes and tsunamis, with records existing from the Great Kanto earthquake of 1923 that caused so much damage to the city, and the Great East Japan earthquake of 2011, perhaps most famous for the near-nuclear disaster it sparked of the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. Today, the river is mostly the domain of pleasure craft, with companies offering different cruises up and down the lower reaches, either on traditional boats or slightly more glamorous and space-age options. I took a tour that headed south from the Azumabashi Bridge close to the Senso-Ji complex towards the mouth of the river, ending at the Hinoid Pier in the Docklands. Along the way, the boat passed under a number of different road and rail bridges of the city, all of which date from after the Great Kanto earthquake of 1923. From the start of the river to its mouth, there are 26 different bridges, equating to about one every kilometre. The first to be passed under is the 1927 Komagata Road Bridge. Shortly after the river is joined by the Ninabashi River, we pass under the 1926 built Eitai Bridge. one of the first bridges to be rebuilt after the earthquake, replacing the 1897 built bridge, which itself had been the first iron road bridge in the country, but the deck and base had been built from wood, and so the bridge caught fire following the earthquake. From here you start to get more of a view of the skyscrapers of the city and the impressive 1993 Chuo-hashi, or Central Bridge. Beyond the Chuo-hashi, the river starts to split as you enter the former docks area, which, much like docks areas in many other post-industrial cities, is rapidly being redeveloped with gleaming towers of offices and apartments. As we head further downstream towards the mouth of the river, the boat makes a quick detour through the lock gates and into the waters surrounding the Hamariku Gardens to make a short stop at the landing stage at the edge of the garden complex. From the garden complex, it's back out through the lock gates into the mainstream of the Sumida for the short journey down to our final destination. At the end of the cruise is the Hinode Pier, from where you can take in the views of Tokyo Port Bridge, more commonly called the Rainbow Bridge, which marks the entrance into Tokyo Bay. About 1,500 metres from the pier is the Zozo-Ji Temple, one of the lesser visited of the city's temples, though perhaps the best place to get views of the Tokyo Tower. Which is strange, as the temple has played quite an important part in the history of both the city and Japan. The temple had a close relationship with the Tokugawa clan, the last of the shoguns before power passed back to the emperor at the same time as the capital relocated to Tokyo. In fact, 6 of the Tokugawa shoguns are buried in a mausoleum in the temple grounds. Equally important is the temple's main gate, which is the oldest wooden building in Tokyo, dating from 1622, having survived earthquakes, fires, and the bombing raids at the end of World War II. The forerunner to the temple was founded in the late 9th century, somewhere in the area that the Imperial Palace occupies today. Originally founded as a Shingon temple, it was converted to Jodo-shu Buddhism in 1393, which is when the official founding of Zozo-Ji is given. As Nijo Castle expanded, it became necessary to relocate the temple on multiple occasions, with it finally settling in its current location in 1590. With the fall of the Tokugawa shogunate, the grounds became more of a public park. The temple was badly damaged in the bombing raids of World War II, with the main hall being rebuilt in 1974. As you may have guessed, the main reason for heading over here is to visit the Tokyo Tower, which dominates the skyline behind the temple, and the small park that buffers between the temple and the tower's base. The Japan Radio Tower, but more commonly known as the Tokyo Tower, is a communications and observation tower that was completed in 1958. At 332.9 metres high, it was the tallest tower in Japan until the construction work on the Tokyo Skytree surpassed it in 2010. The lattice tower is inspired by the Eiffel Tower. Due to the proximity of Haneda Airport, the tower is painted white and international orange, virtually the same colour as the 25th of April Bridge in Lisbon and the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco, which is the main visual difference to that of the Eiffel Tower, though there are other, more subtle differences. It's about 33 metres taller than its Parisian parent, not including the antennas, but due to the thinner and simpler construction, it only weighs about 4,000 tonnes, nearly half the weight of the original. Unlike the Eiffel Tower, access to the lower observation decks is via a lift that runs up a central core, rather than sloping up the legs. In 1953, NHK, the Japanese state broadcaster, began television broadcasts and erected a large broadcasting tower to support this. As more private broadcasting companies began operating over the following months, the Japanese government feared the city could end up being overrun by broadcast towers, so they decided rather than having smaller towers on broadcasters' roofs, a single, large tower capable of transmitting for the whole region would be built. It also helped that at the same time, because of the post-war boom, the country was searching for a monument to symbolise the nation's recovery from World War II, and the TV tower turned out to be the perfect project. Unlike Gustav Eiffel, the designers of the Tokyo Tower also needed to make sure it would survive the effects of an earthquake significantly stronger than the 1923 one, and with typhoons with wind speeds of up to 220 km an hour. Not major considerations for the geologically and meteorologically benign Ile-de-France. Groundbreaking on the tower was in June 1957, and every day at least 400 labourers worked on the tower. Around a third of the steel, which was used in its construction, was scrap metal taken from the US tanks damaged in the Korean War. The 90-metre-long antenna was bolted into place just 16 months later, on the 14th of October 1958, making the Tokyo Tower the tallest freestanding tower in the world, taking the title from the Eiffel Tower by 9 metres. The tower opened to the public on the 23rd of December 1958. Alongside leasing antennas, the tower's other main source of income is tourism, and at one time it was the most popular attraction in the city, but with the opening of the Skytree, those in search of a bird's-eye view of the city have headed over there, leaving the tower, where the observation deck is below the level of many of the surrounding office blocks, a much quieter place. And all the better for it, for those who venture out here, as the views, particularly at sunset, are just as stunning, but much less crowded. With the switchover from analogue to digital broadcasting, the antenna on the Tokyo Tower became obsolete as the tower wasn't tall enough to transmit the higher frequency waves required for digital transmission, being surrounded by a forest of high-rise buildings. And that's the main reason for the city gaining the Tokyo Skytree, which is now the main TV broadcast tower for the city. Some FM radio stations continue to use the tower, but many of them have also moved to the Skytree. Up until 1987, the tower was only lit by bulbs on the corner contours that extended from the base to the antenna, and it was felt that this was not helping with the fall in visitor numbers ahead of the tower's 30th anniversary, so a new lighting arrangement was installed and unveiled in 1989. 176 floodlights in and around the tower's frame now illuminate the structure every night from dusk to midnight. From the 2nd of October to the 6th of July, the tower is lit orange to help offset the cold of the autumn, winter and spring nights. From the 7th of July to the 1st of October, the tower is lit white to hint at a cooler colour to offset the oppressive summer months, but the tower can also be illuminated in other colours for special events or commemorations. It takes about 28,000 litres of paint to completely paint the structure, which they need to do every 5 years, taking about a year to complete the work. Thankfully, the last paint job had been in 2024, so the tower was looking particularly spruced up when I visited. But it's not just the Tokyo Tower that becomes peaceful after sunset. A lot of the city empties of tourists, and it makes for the perfect time to visit sites that at other times are just a heaving mass of humanity. So from the TV tower, I headed back over to the Senso-Ji to take a much easier walk down between the gates to the main hall, floodlit, but much quieter than during the day. Tokyo, a city of 14 million, a metro area of 41 million, the most populated city on the planet, yet even here it's possible to escape the crowds and find peace and tranquility in the heart of the city. And I've started, perhaps not on the best foot, by heading to the Imperial Palace, because what says quiet, tranquil location, not visited by tourists, than the palace of the last remaining emperor on the planet. Although in this case, the distance between the tourists and the royal household is significantly bigger in Tokyo than the numbers crowding around Buckingham Palace, the Amalienborg or Palacio Real. In fact, as a tourist, you can get significantly closer to the President of the US and the White House from Lafayette Square than you'll ever will to the Emperor of Japan in the Imperial Palace. So if it's not the Imperial Palace people are visiting, what is it? Well, it's the Imperial Palace East Gardens, the site of the original Edo Castle, home to the shoguns who ruled the country from Tokyo, then Edo, when the capital and emperor were still 400 kilometres away in Kyoto. The site was first developed by warrior Edo Shigesugu around the end of the 12th century, but the castle wouldn't be built on the site until 1457. After passing through various hands, the castle ended up in the hands of the Tokugawa clan and therefore became their base of power when the Tokugawa shogunate took control of the country. Originally, parts of the site were underwater as the sea reached this far up into the city, but large-scale engineering works changed the landscape for the construction of the castle. Various works took place over nearly 2 centuries before the final completion of the site in 1636. By the time the works were complete, the castle had 38 gates, the ramparts were almost 20 metres high and the outer walls were 12 metres high, with concentric rings of moats adding to the fortifications of the site. At strategic points along the walls there were keeps and defensive towers, of which the Fujimi Yagura, or Fuji Tower, which on a clear day was reported to have been able to see as far as the mountain, is one of the last surviving examples. After the end of the shogunate in 1867, the inhabitants of the castle were forced to vacate the premises, with the castle compound first renamed Tokyo Castle in 1868, and then the Imperial Castle the following year. A fire ripped through the old Edo castle on the night of May the 5th, 1873, and all that survived was the stone base of the keep. Advantage was taken of this to build a new imperial palace in a slightly different location and to remove all the remaining Tokugawa-era buildings, creating the large park space that is the Honmaru today. You can climb up to the top of the stone base of the keep, taking in views over the park. Apart from the base, the Honmaru is not much more today than a wide open space dotted with large trees, but the remainder of the garden site is much more interesting to explore. In 1959, following the destruction of the Imperial Palace during the air raids of World War II, a report was submitted to the Prime Minister of Japan outlining plans for reconstruction of a new Imperial Palace and complex in the western area of the palace grounds, and the development of the eastern side of the grounds into gardens to be opened to the public. Work on the garden started in 1961 and took 7 years to complete, with the East Gardens opening to the public on October 1st, 1968. Along with the Honmaru, the gardens include the Ninamaru and the Sanamaru, or outer areas of the grounds, originally separated by ramparts, walls and gates. Immediately behind the now empty base of the keep is one of the 3 gates that allow public access to the park, the Kita Hanabashi Gate, which provides an excellent view of the engineering works that went into building the site from the wide moat and tall, thick defensive walls. Further examples of the layers of defences are on show as you descend down from the Honmaru to the Ninamaru and through the site of other gates and inner moats before you reach the third of the 3 gates you can enter through, the Hirakara-mon Gate. Back into the Ninamaru, which shows just how fortified the upper Honmaru is from the rest of the complex, from the high rampart walls on top of which the original Nijo Castle was built. Down here is the Ninamaru Grove, the castle gardens, which in mid-April were a sea of pink and reds from the heavily tamed rhododendron bushes. As well as the last few trees in full blossom bloom. And just beyond the grove is the Ninamaru Garden, set around the Ninamaru Pond, with bridges and pathways allowing you to explore the space. But it wasn't just the castle gardens that were opened up in the 1960s. Prior to that, in 1949, the large plaza in front of the main entrance to the Imperial Palace was also opened up to the public. During the Edo period, this area was called the Nishimonaru Shita and was the home to the mansions of the feudal lords connected to the shoguns, as well as horse riding grounds and stables. The plaza is centred around a large lawn and bordered by the moats of the inner palace and behind it the outer moats. Across the site, black pine trees dot the grass. considering how densely packed the city is, this is a rare large space of open land, way away from the skyscrapers and to some extent the traffic of Tokyo. Another place where you can escape the traffic is in the Hamariku Gardens. Located at the mouth of the Sumida River, the Hamariku Gardens is a 250,000 square metre landscape gardens that opened to the public in April 1946 on the site of a former villa belonging to the Tokugawa shoguns. Around the same time that the Tokugawa family were taking control of Japan and Nijo Castle, the lands to the east and south of the castle were still mostly marshes and swamps, with a sea of reeds being the main thing visible from the castle. To build the major city that the shoguns wanted, there would need to be land reclamation, and slowly over the following years higher ground was excavated and the resulting soil was used to fill in the reed beds and swamps. In 1654, the younger brother of the then shogun received permission from his sibling to reclaim land from the bay to build a villa and garden. The property was eventually inherited by his son, who would go on to become the shogun himself, at which point the villa became a secondary residence of the shogun, in particular as a retreat where he could indulge in falconry. The villa itself was destroyed by fire in 1724 and was never rebuilt, but the gardens were retained, even serving as a palatial paddock for an elephant that the shogun received as a gift from Vietnam in 1729. Towards the end of the shogunate period, the site was turned over to the navy as a training ground, and in 1867 a Western-style stone building was erected in the gardens as a place for foreign diplomats to stay when they were visiting Edo. After the restoration of the emperor, the site was proclaimed as the Hammer Palace, or Hamariku. Though the name may have changed, the function remained the same, with the building used as a state guest house. Visitors included the former US President Ulysses S. Grant, who was on a world tour and stayed for a month, and Crown Prince Frederick Wilhelm of Germany, who would later go on to become Frederick III, and at 99 days between accession and death, the shortest serving German emperor. The state guest house was demolished in 1889 and the gardens were largely destroyed by the firestorms that followed the 1923 earthquake and were damaged again by fire following the Tokyo air raid of 1945. But compared to the rest of a totally destroyed city, was still an oasis of green and became a popular destination for the war-scarred residents of the city. The restoration of the park became part of an unemployment relief programme delivered by the Allied powers. The main feature of the gardens is the tidal pond. Seawater is drawn into the pond directly from the Sumida River and Tokyo Bay, with sluice gates being opened and closed based on the tides and water levels to ensure a gentle ebb and flow of the tides. Because it's connected directly to the bay, the tidal pond is home to mullet, sago, goby and eels that swim in from the bay. Crabs and barnacles can be seen on the rocks and stones in the pond as well. In the centre of the pond is the small island of Nakajima, which is linked to the shore by the Otsutai-bashi Bridge. On the centre of Nakajima Island is the Nakajima no Ochaya, a traditional tea house which was restored in 1983, at the same time as the bridge, and is open for the public to enjoy matcha tea and sugar cake. On the northern side of the tide pond are 3 further restored tea houses which have been placed here to show examples of different style tea houses from around the region. In several locations around the garden, artificial hills have been created that you can climb up to take in the views over the gardens and the estuary of the Sumida River that laps around the fortified base of the gardens. But perhaps the biggest surprise for relative peace and tranquility in the city is located just a mile from the busiest railway station on the planet in the Meiji Jingu Shrine Complex. The complex is located in the forest area next to the tracks leading into Shinjuku Station, which in 2023-24 received just over 1.1 billion visitors, of which 929 million were commuters, equating to about 3.6 million every day. To put that in context, Gare du Nord in Paris, Europe's busiest station, gets less than a quarter of that annual number, and London Liverpool Street less than a tenth. New York Penn struggles to get over the 100 million mark. The Meiji Shrine is dedicated to the deified spirits of Emperor Meiji and his wife, Empress Shokan. Emperor Meiji was the emperor under whom the nation left the feudal shogun era and entered into the modern age, moving from a society at risk of Western domination to an imperial powerhouse that controlled large parts of East Asia. Following the emperor's death in 1912, the Japanese parliament passed a resolution to commemorate his role in the restoration of the emperor. An iris garden in an area of the east of central Tokyo, where the emperor and empress had been known to visit, was chosen as the location to build a shrine. Construction work began in 1915 with the building of a shrine turned into a national project, mobilising youth groups and other civic associations from across the country who contributed labour and funding. The shrine was formally dedicated on the 3rd of November 1920, with work completed on the structure in 1921 and the grounds finished by 1926. The original buildings were destroyed during the Tokyo air raids, but were rebuilt with a new shrine completed in 1958. The shrine is located in a 70-acre forest that today is covered by around 120,000 evergreen trees from 365 different species. There are two areas to the shrine itself. The Gion is the outer precinct, which includes the Meiji Memorial Picture Gallery that houses a collection of 80 large murals illustrating events in the lives of the emperor. The Nyan is the inner precinct, which is centred on the shrine buildings and includes a treasure museum that houses articles that belonged to the emperor and empress. Next to the shrine is the Meiji Jingu Goyen, or the Meiji Shrine Inner Garden. This 83,000 square metre garden is home to that iris garden that the Imperial family liked to visit, and today includes century-old trees, a tranquil pond and paths to follow around the different areas. The garden was first laid out around 400 years ago, but Emperor Meiji commissioned several additions to the garden, including the Kakuntai tea house, specially built as a place to sit and rest for the empress. In the days of the Emperor Meiji, this was part of the Imperial Palace estate and was off limits to most people, but today, after you've paid the small entry fee, you're free to wander around the gardens and take in the views. You may even get to see some of the local wildlife. The Nanshi Pond covers around 8,300 square metres and is fed by pure spring water. The carp living in the pond today are said to be direct descendants of those released by the emperor himself more than a century ago. Kiyomasa's well is named after the military commander who dug it around 400 years ago and is the source for water that feeds both the Nanshi ponds and irrigates the iris beds. Its water maintains a constant temperature of 15 Celsius or 59 Fahrenheit all year round. The best time to visit the gardens is in June, when the irises that the Imperial family loves so much are in bloom. The display includes 1,500 iris plants from 150 different species. But if, like me, you're here in April, then you'll just have to make do with a display of the azaleas and rhododendrons in the azalea garden, featuring trees that include examples that are over 100 years old, that combine to create a tunnel of flowers and blossoms that no video camera can ever do justice to for the vibrance or the fragrance. Leaving the shrine complex, you pass by a display of beautifully painted sake barrels. The full barrels are typically donated to the shrine by sake brewers from all over Japan for consumption on special occasions. The barrels on display are, naturally, the empties. Tokyo's Haneda and Narita airports combined are the third busiest airport system in the world after London and New York, and between them have links across the planet to airports on every continent. Haneda is significantly closer to the centre of Tokyo, being just 30 minutes by rail and monorail, or 45 minutes by metro. Narita is much further out from the city centre, taking between an hour and 2 hours, with prices for express and local trains matching the speed. Kansai International Airport serves Kyoto as well as Osaka and Kobe. Located on an artificial island in the middle of Osaka Bay, it was designed with rail links in mind, with the Haruka Limited Express connecting the airport to Osaka in 45 minutes and Kyoto in just under 90 minutes. Japan's internationally renowned Shinkansen run a very high-frequency service between the two cities, with the fastest Tokaido Shinkansen, the Nozomi, making the journey at least 4 times an hour in 2 hours 15 minutes. Slower versions, making more stops, can take around 3 hours, but cost less. Sit on the right-hand side from Tokyo to Kyoto, or the left-hand side on the return, to catch the 4-minute view of Mount Fuji as you speed past. Once in a lifetime will never be enough to do justice to this amazing country. Sayonara, Nihon.